Hello, and welcome to Cybility Savvy, the show that demystifies cybersecurity for not-for-profit boards and leaders. I'm your host, Michala Liavaag, and today we're going to be talking with Maureen Chaffe about their journey to becoming a cyber-savvy executive. We'll explore the ins and outs of cybersecurity in local government sector from the perspective of both employee and trustee.
Cybility Savvy, the quickest way to go from cyber confused to cyber savvy.
Hi, Maureen. Thank you so much for coming today. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for the invite. So I'm Maureen Chaffe. I'm the Director of Process Matters 2, which is a company I set up about 15 years ago. My early years were spent in the aircraft industry. That was just when computers were coming in, actually, dealing in bonded warehouses and things. I then joined local government when I got married and started off as a clerk, worked my way up to running the planning administration, more on the techie side than just on the admin side. So starting to automate the processes we did, involved in building the first national planning system. And then eventually, when the government gave local authorities the target of everybody being online by the year 2000, joke, I got the job, which was a massive step up for me. Got involved in all sorts of things to do with moving the local authority to using online systems, putting in customer relationship management, all sorts of automation. And at the same time, running a team of program and project managers, which is where I met Michala. Michala came and joined us. And working sort of cross-partnership across lots of local authorities. So that's kind of my background before I left and retired, in inverted commas. But I'm easily bored. So that's why I find myself where I am today.
Yeah, that is absolutely something we do have in common. I always say better busy than bored. One of the things that I first experienced with you was your sort of passion around data protection. The way you sort of put that across in a different way to how I'd heard it before. How did you kind of sort of flow into that?
When I got the job for the year 2000, I got all the jobs that nobody else knew what to do with. So the Freedom of Information Act was new then, and it was junked in with everything else I was doing. I'm told, year 2000, get everybody compliant, get everybody online, but also you're in charge of data protection, freedom of information, managing the website, IT security, you name it, I got it. I had to try to find ways of introducing the two compliance subjects in a way that people would listen to, because say I'm easily bored. I knew that if I didn't deliver it in a way that people found interesting, they weren't going to get it. So I've always, and I mean, data protection is my core business now. My view is if I can make people understand why data protection is important to them personally, they'll get why it's important to their business, their company, their charity. So that's really how I got into it. I'm not an expert by any means, but I do have 25 years worth of experience of handling frontline GDPR, data protection, FOI type queries.
Just for the people who perhaps aren't aware of how government's structured, they might just sort of think, oh, well, a central government, local government. Could you perhaps just explain for them a little bit about those differences and therefore the kind of range of services that you would have been engaged with managing data protection across those?
Government really basically sets out into your ministerial type things, the people that you generally see. At a more local level, when you get beyond your MP, you get a county council. And the county council is usually responsible for the big issues. So things like roads and transport, education, social services, that type of stuff. The next level down is the district council. And the district councils are responsible for delivering things like housing services, revenues and benefits, planning, environmental health, the kind of more generalist stuff that goes on in a district. And then below that, you have another tier, which are your town and parish councils. They're at a local level, delivering small-scale services mostly. Some of the bigger town councils deliver a lot of crossover with the district council. So there are some town councils that have got a staff of maybe 15 or 20. Parish councils tend to range in size from 4 hours a week to somebody who may be 3 or 4 days a week. Very few of them are full-time. So they have a lot of work and, generally speaking, very little time to do it. In the local authority scenario, when I was working there, I was working across the range of people asking for housing inquiries. So they want to know, everybody thinks that local government has got a secret file on them. It's just kind of it. So they would make requests. I want to see everything the housing department know about me. Or environmental health, somebody's got a problem with a complaint and a noise complaint. I want to know what you know about this person. The types of inquiries you get there have to be handled in a central way, because if somebody makes a request for information, they're requesting it from the whole business, not just from a sector. So my job was to bring together what everybody knew about a client, and then to go through it and redact it to remove the names and identifiers of other people. It's a tedious job, actually. It's quite important that it's done right, because the Information Commissioner has quite a lot of teeth and can fine you quite heavily for getting it wrong. That's kind of how it worked across those sort of different sectors. And these days, I'm working mainly at the town and parish council level, but I still work up into the district council level on some of the work I do, because there's a crossover.
What sort of different, I suppose, challenges do you see in parish councils versus what you see in district councils?
Oh, they are polar opposites. I should probably sort of frame it by the fact that I do work across a number of sectors now. So I do a lot of work in local authorities, sort of parish councils. I do a huge amount in charities, and I also do some in education and some in businesses. So it's kind of a range. The theme that runs across all the people I work with is that none of them have got any money. So anything that you're doing is always going to be a challenge. So a district authority, generally speaking, has got a reasonably large budget for tech and has usually got an IT team. Parish and town councils just haven't. When I first started working with the parish councils, I didn't find any that weren't using their home email addresses for business. Most of them were using their home phones for business. They had no computer systems at all. Some of them were using their home PCs to keep the council business on. A complete mess, really. I've been working to try to move them to a different way of working, but the challenge is always the fact that if they've got any money, their councillors don't want them to spend it on IT, because that's not visible to the public. Also, a huge lack of knowledge, total lack of understanding of what these things are about. That, I think, is the biggest difference between them. They, generally speaking, well, until I got involved around here, none of them had any backup or support of any IT professional.
Yeah,
so
that's scary.
It is scary. And it's also a GDPR nightmare. If I've learned one thing from all of this, it's been that everywhere I've been to try to do GDPR, my first problem has been technology. I spent the whole of lockdown trying to get mainly elderly parish councillors online so that they could continue to have meetings using computers that didn't have cameras, microphones that they'd never used, some kit that wasn't capable of taking the technology anyway, it was so old. We ended up having to put telephone conferencing in so that people could join meetings, because democracy had to continue, but they weren't allowed to meet. But it really shows the difference in the business sector and these kind of smaller organisations when it comes to their ability to deal with technology.
Just thinking about that, of course, just because they are smaller and don't have the budgets doesn't mean that they don't have really sensitive data. Is it an issue that they kind of recognise, or is it just kind of accepted that that's the risk?
Mostly they don't recognise it, because they would say that they don't have personal data, that all they get is an inquiry from a customer and they'll say, yeah, your bin's going to be empty or whatever. My argument is that they always have information about the clerk, which they're swapping. So if they're talking about her pay review, they'll be doing it on their home computers. Well, that's not acceptable. GDPR says, basically, if I paraphrase it, it basically says you need to know if you've had a data breach. Now, I'm at a loss to know how I would know if you've had a data breach if you're all working on your own email accounts on your own laptops. And that's the only way that I've managed to sell the move away from the way they were working to the way I want them to work. And if I then translate that to my charities, the issue is far more serious, because some of them are dealing with the most sensitive data. and they are doing it on bits of paper. Now they've gone home to work and they've put a plug on a paper process. So now they're working on the kitchen table, but they're talking on Zoom. So what happens to all that paperwork when you finish the meeting? So there's all that going on in the mix. And I don't think, well, in fact, I know, because I've moaned to the Information Commissioner about it, they don't get what it's like down here at the coalface. You know, for people who they're willing to do their best, but they haven't got the money. Quite often, from a GDPR point of view, I have to take a pragmatic view and say, we've got that as good as we can get it with the resources we've got.
Would you say that one of the big shifts around the old Data Protection Act to GDPR and now the DPA 2018 is that it used to be quite prescriptive and now it is risk-based? So there is that acknowledgement in the law that, you know, different size organisations will have different abilities to manage the risk in terms of putting those controls in. I'm just sort of thinking how you sort of reconcile knowing that there's some really sensitive stuff here. The law says, yes, you should protect it. But again, being pragmatic, there's a risk to be accepted. How does that sort of play through?
So in the case of the parish councils, generally speaking, if I produce them a report which explains what the risk is and that they are liable for that risk, usually they will step up and say, okay, we've got to find the money. It's not always the case, but usually they will do that. If they don't and they haven't got the money to do it, then I will look at what is the risk? What could they lose? If I stop them doing this, this and this, would that reduce the risk? And if I can do that, what we do is we do a full audit trail of what we've done. And my view on that is that they can show that they're on the journey to compliance, but they're not there yet.
Yeah.
Because actually, I don't think anybody's there yet. With all of my groups, we always talk about the journey to compliance. We can't get there in one go, not only because of money, but because if you only work 4 hours a week, you haven't got the time to give to it. And certainly with my charity customers, where, you know, their core business is not tech and it's not sorting out IT, it's talking to clients who've got immediate problems. You know, I've got to recognize that's their day job. So that's why I say, I think you sometimes just have to step back and say, are we doing the best we can? And sometimes it will be, well, there'll be some more money next year. And if we can wait till next year, we'll add a bit more on to what we've done.
It's exactly the same thing from a cybersecurity perspective as well. It's about that. What can you do now? What's good enough? And then iterate and improve as you can. And the thing that I always say is that, you know, cybersecurity, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. So you've just got to sort of keep building on that.
You know, I joke with my customers that I like to rule by fear. And I like them to think when they're about to press a button, what did Maureen say? I'd love to give you a little example of the challenge that I think we have. I've, over the last week, been sending out emails from one of my email accounts. It's a known email account, it's a Gmail one, to some of my customers randomly. It says, I need your help, spelt with a K. The first line says, hello, I'd like you to check this document for me. And it's all in italics. It's not signed by Maureen. It's got no other credential on it. And it's got a click on a PowerPoint. And when you click on the PowerPoint, a great big picture comes up of a red skull and crossbones and things saying, this is a ransomware attack. So far, everybody I've sent it to has opened it. Every one of them has opened the attachment. None of them have contacted myself or their IT support to tell them that they've made a mistake. When challenged, most of them have come to me and said, well, I thought it was something wrong with it, but it was from you, so we thought it'd be all right. And I just think that just to me says what an uphill struggle it is all the time. You've got to keep on and on and on. And I've had a meeting this morning with one of those groups saying, okay, come on, fess up, who opened it? And there was a lot of red faces. And we all had a good laugh about it. And then we had a really serious talk about the level of cyber threat there is at the moment and how disastrous that could have been. Cyber professionals as data professionals, whatever we call, whatever line we're in, we've got to keep this message up high all the time because they're not getting it. They really aren't.
It is a really difficult one as well, because, on the one hand, we sort of say stay vigilant, and I think there's generally been that acceptance in the industry that it's no longer training once a year. It is about ongoing campaigns and showing examples and recognizing people who do report and saying thank you for protecting the organisation. But equally, the challenge is it only takes one. When you've got people who are really overworked and stressed and they're trying to do lots, inevitably something's going to give. People make mistakes. So I agree, it's a really uphill challenge.
Yeah, and I think all we can do is just to keep on and on about it, trying to make it fun. If you keep on at people, they just blank it out anyway. But it just makes that point to me that lots of people have got no idea how high the risk is. I talk all the time about the big companies that have been hacked and how much it's cost them, and try to give those kind of examples, as well as giving the small examples of the data breaches we have every week. Friday afternoon in my world is data breach afternoon. Yeah. And it's because somebody's in a rush on a Friday afternoon and they don't engage their brain and they send something and they sent it to the wrong place. So it's that constant kind of trying to say to people that these things are happening and you've got to be aware of them. This one this week has been real fun. I couldn't believe that everybody would open it. I really couldn't.
Yeah, I think the concerning thing for me there is not just the fact that they opened it, but the fact that no one reported it. That's the thing for me, because I have a little bit of a rant quite frequently about phishing simulations and the way they are misused. It's not that I don't think they can be an effective tool in the awareness sort of tool chest. I think they can be. But what I often see is organisations who just look at the click rate and they just focus on reducing that, when actually what I want to see is of the people who did click through or did put their credentials in, who reported it and how did they report it? Was it through the agreed official channels? Was there kind of back channels that they kind of went through? And I find that always to be most enlightening about the readiness of organisation to deal with an incident.
There's that, but I think there's also, we're almost victims of our own success, because what I hear from people is, we don't know why this got through because we're paying for security. So we don't have to worry about this because you've secured our systems. What I try to say to people is that our cybersecurity is only generally 1 or 2 steps ahead of the latest hacker. Every now and then they get lucky and they get ahead of us. Our virus checking software may not pick it up. So we still need you to be the frontline people and to understand that you've got to report it.
It's not new. We've been doing this for decades and we still are struggling with it, which just shows how difficult sort of human risk management is. Just thinking about the work you've been doing across these different sectors and the fact that it is challenging and sometimes you feel like you're not sort of getting anywhere. What would you say are the most important traits for a leader who is working to improve data protection and cybersecurity in these organisations?
You've got to take the people with you. When you're on your own in business, you've got to work hard to take people with you to make sure you explain things properly and that you're constantly patient with them. Although we talk about cybersecurity as being really important, I think everybody underestimates the appalling lack of skills that there are in people in terms of tech. I mean, I have people who say to me, oh, I'm too old to work this out. And I'm older than them. People who don't know how to file, people who ring me up regularly of an evening to say that they filed something and the computer's taken it. There are all those sorts of challenges, and I have to be endlessly patient going back to people and saying, do you remember we talked last week? And do you remember I showed you how to do this? I've got my own YouTube channel now, and I actually create YouTube clips and send them to them so that they can practice and rehearse it and make sure that they get it. And again, if you only work 4 hours a week in a particular job, and I've shown you how to do something on Monday morning, by the time you come back in the next week, quite often they've forgotten what I told them. It's constantly making sure that you're referencing, that you're giving them tools, you're helping them to find what they need to get where they're going. But we're trying at the moment to make life as easy as we can for a lot of the charities. We've just developed an app that works off of mobile phones so that charities can let their key workers have conferences and such like, and they'll fill in their notes of the meeting on their mobile phone. They'll take a photograph of their notes and it will convert their text into a document and file it for them in the file that they're working in, and nothing stays on the phone. So we're trying to move people away from the problems of A, not having decent kit, B, having kit they don't know how to use, like scanners and things which are expensive to maintain, printers are difficult to maintain, and when they use them, they don't know where they filed it. That combined with the fact that we've got so many people who are working from home and keeping the paper at home, and I just can't have that. Kind of working now to develop some new ways of letting people work. And I've actually done 2 demos this morning of our new product, and they're blown away by it, which is really gratifying. So I'm quite excited about that, because it's meeting a need that I've identified and I didn't know how to fix it.
Yeah, anything I think that helps people do things in a better and more secure way, I think is positive. So
I've learned that there's no point if you don't take people with you, you're wasting your time.
As you say, that's a lot of really sensitive information that they're dealing with. How do you find, that the trustees themselves actually, do they recognise and acknowledge this? Do they even become aware of it? What's your sort of experience there? Because I know that you've also previously been a trustee as well.
The problem with being a trustee is that people don't realise that it has a huge legal basis behind it. I tend to try to meet with trustees at the beginning of my relationship with the charity to talk to them and make them understand that GDPR is their personal legal liability. And I think you have to say it that way. You are liable for the data that's being collected in this organisation. So how are we together going to work together to make sure that we secure that? If you can get the trustees on board, and if you can have some authority, I can generally handle trustees. I don't expect their managers to handle them, because the managers tend to have a different role. So I will meet with them, I'll talk to them about what the legal liability is, what the responsibilities are, and then talk to them about a roadmap for helping them to get to where I think they need to be. It's rare that I don't get them on board. There have been a couple where I haven't. They have a report from me, which I insist that they minute at their board meeting that they're refusing to accept the recommendations. That's all I can do. If they then have a data breach, the Information Commissioner, I suspect, will take a pretty dim view. So you do have a little bit of clout. The sort of trustees I'm working with, they're nice people, they're good people, they have a heart for the charity they're working for. They understand why it's important to look after their clients' data. They often haven't got the money to do it. That's a different issue. My training sessions that I tend to do, if I can, I tend to do one with the trustees on their own first. And then when we do the next training session on GDPR, we do trustees, staff and volunteers all at the same time if I can, because I think that cross-fertilisation of ideas and understandings is good for everybody to hear. But it's also always exciting because nearly always the volunteers tell the managers that the managers don't actually know what the volunteers are doing. And it transpires that the volunteers are doing things a completely different way to what the managers were expecting. So that's always quite exciting as well. But it's keeping all of them on board and developing that relationship so that they feel they can pick up the phone or ping me on Teams if they are not sure or they think they've done something silly. And I will not be a data protection officer for an organisation unless I have a relationship with them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I just wanted to pick up on something you said both now and earlier around the sort of digital skills of trustees and the systems that they're using. So do you find that once you sort of got them on board, they're quite happy, for example, to not use personal email accounts and not use personal devices? Or do you still find some resistance around that for other reasons?
No, in fact, the charity sector has been easier to move than the parish councillors have. Moving parish councillors away from using the home email addresses is quite exciting. I've got them all there now. No, I think that when you explain to trustees that email is one of their weakest links, the reason most people don't want to use a charity-owned email address is because they say, oh, I don't want to go somewhere else to look for my emails. when you say to them, well, actually, did you know you can have them all on the same screen as separate accounts? You're not allowed to put them all together. But I mean, I've got like 25 email accounts on my screen now. You can see your mail coming into them one at a time, and you can decide whether to open it because you're not working for that charity today. And they go, oh, didn't know I could do that. As soon as you get over that hurdle and you get their phone set up so that they can see their mail coming in, everything else seems to fade away. It's a really interesting point. And I kind of get it, because why would you want to go to more than one device to look for your emails? I mean, you're just not going to do it, are you?
Do you think that when people are actually recruiting trustees, digital skills and knowledge around data protection and cybersecurity should actually be part of the criteria when interviewing? Or is that perhaps going a step too far, do you think?
I would love to be able to do all sorts of things like that. But the reality is, in the world I'm working in, it's becoming harder and harder and harder to get trustees. In fact, it's getting harder and harder to get volunteers of any kind. Certainly, one of the charities I used to work for, they introduced that we had to do a big training regime every year. And it worked out that I would be doing more training days with them than I was doing for my professional career. And I said, well, it's just not going to happen. I'm a volunteer. So I think, yeah, I'd love to have that. And there are some trustees who go through, there's lots of trustee training courses, and they do it very well. But the vast majority, no, it's just not going to happen. But I do think that you know, whatever of the spheres I'm working in, whatever we do, we've got to keep this message going all the time about, you know, it doesn't matter who you are or what you are, you're not bigger than the organisation. The organisation should set down standards and rules about how you're going to work. The first one being that you don't get access to company systems or charity systems until you've signed the data protection policy, signed the IT security policy, and had some GDPR training. And that shouldn't happen after they've been in the organisation 6 months. So I think that setting those standards and getting trustees, governors, etc., to endorse that as the way the organisation is going to structure itself is a good starting point, because it says we take this subject seriously. We understand that if we give these people access to the systems before they've been trained, that's like giving a burglar a key to your house. And I think that some of that is kind of instilling into any of these groups, or whatever level they are, that that's the starting point. We're going to be an organisation that takes this stuff seriously. We're going to get it wrong, no doubt about it. We will get it wrong, but hopefully not so badly that it causes a lot of pain to people.
In my experience, certainly, there's very few organisations that their top leadership are willing to go that far about saying, you know, no, you will not have access to these systems until you've done all these things, because that would be great. I agree with you, but there's very few.
That's crazy, really. If we don't, as an industry, drive the standards, we're not helping those people lower who are not in the industry to drive the standards, if you see what I mean. You know, if I say to my parish clerks, well, oh, I don't care if you don't get it signed, I'll log them in anyway. Well, I'm complicit in getting it wrong, aren't I?
I think that's a really interesting point. I both agree and disagree on that. The part of me that agrees is the sort of security purist in me that's like, people absolutely should not have access until you've verified their identity. They've done, as you say, the security training, the privacy data protection training, and also the training around the specific application that they're going to be using, if there's any particular rules around that from a security point of view, which quite often there are. But then the kind of pragmatic, risk-based person in me is like, well, I can give you my recommendation and this is it. But as an organisation, the leadership still have that flexibility to accept that or not, and the risk that goes with it if they don't accept the recommendation. I don't personally view myself as complicit as long as I've made it clear what my recommendation is. It's still their decision, I feel.
Yeah, I guess that's complicit is the wrong word, but I kind of feel, because I've got a number of different hats on. So, you know, I'm actually the external data protection officer for a lot of these organisations. So my role is to actually guide and make sure they're on the right track. So that says to me, I don't want people in systems till I know that they're not a burglar. Then I've got my sitting here doing Office 365 accounts on a daily basis, trying to get people set up, kind of semi-tech role. So I'm kind of like the IT person, but I'm not fully. And then I've also got that kind of bit of me that says, as a manager of people, and when I was a manager in the local authority, my teams had an induction program. They had a day one, a week one, a month one induction program. And I think day one, there are some really important essentials that you've got to check out. Because if you look at the statistics, there are some fairly alarming statistics about the number of data breaches which occur within the first 2 months of an employee joining an organisation. And there are even more terrifying ones about the numbers of breaches after a person's left the organisation because people didn't have an exit strategy which included locking them out of the systems. To me, as a data protection professional, it's basically saying those things have got to happen, because if they don't, and you haven't got those good processes in place, you leave the organisation open to risk. As I say, I like to rule by fear.
Yeah, I guess we all have our different approaches, don't we? We're all trying to achieve the same thing at the end of the day.
Yeah.
When was your moment where you clicked about information security and the importance of that? What was it that kind of just went, oh yeah, I get that?
When I was in the local authority, I kind of got it, but it wasn't really my problem, if you know what I mean. Although I was a data protection officer, there was a whole team of tech people in the background. Since I've started on my own and started to get involved in trying to help people to set up their systems, I think it has clicked more, because it's brought together the practical applications of GDPR with the nuts and bolts of how you can actually secure it, understanding how you can share documents, for example, from SharePoint and not attach them to emails. I didn't know how to do that till I looked at SharePoint. Probably couldn't have done it till I got SharePoint. But from a GDPR point of view, one of the things I'm always banging on about is being careful what you attach to an email, because that's a big risk, because people you'll be amazed what people attach to emails in my world. So saying now, actually, I've now got the tools to be able to show you a different way of doing it. That was a real kind of, I can do this. I can actually give you a solution that meets my needs as your DPO, but it also meets the needs of your clients, because it's an easy way of sharing things that they can accept and that you can be fairly certain is secure. So I think that's probably one of those light bulb moments. It's probably just that little bit of a crossover to being much more of a hands-on techie than I was previously. Well, you can't do data protection without good IT security. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, as we sort of bring things to a close, one of the things that I like to invite people to do is to give me sort of 3 things that our audience can take away. What are your 3 things?
I would say the best way to get people on board is by relationship. There's no point beating a stick. It's got to be a relationship. Take people with you. That's so important. Understand your audience, understand their circumstances. It's not one size fits all. Understand the people that you're working with and understand their baseline, where they're coming from, because you can't, it's not fair to try to push people into something that they either can't understand or can't afford. So I think that's really important. I think the final thing really is, I don't know whether it's just me, but I couldn't get out of bed in the morning and do something I didn't enjoy. And I always say to young people when I'm talking to them, if you get a job and you're not enjoying it, change it. Life's too short. Have a bit of fun.
Yeah, no, excellent. Thank you for that. And do you have any sort of book recommendations or anything like that?
I like to listen to podcasts of things like Desert Island Discs, because you listen to really, really inspirational business people on there. And of course, and the Archers. I can't live without the Archers. Sorry.
Oh, brilliant.
To me, listening to people who've done it and learnt from it, often the hard way, actually, they're the people that inspire me. And you can always pick out something from them about the way that they handled people, the way they handled situations, which can inform the way you deal with people going forward. Okay,
so final question. People who would like to chat to you more, where can they find you online?
If anybody would like to talk to me, my website is processmatters2.co.uk, or you can email me at processmatters2@gmail.com. love to chat to anybody. If anybody out there is got a charity or something and they'd like some help, we help charities wherever they are in the country. And if you'd like to learn more about our new app, we'd be very happy to talk to you about that as well.
Cool. Thank you so much for coming, Maureen. It's been really interesting sort of taking this little journey through local government and the other aspects as well with you. So thank you so much for sharing your experiences.
Thanks for the opportunity. Nice chatting to you.